Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new series on Macbeth by Shakespeare. In this series, I'm going to take you through the play scene by scene, but we're just going to start with working out who's who in the play so that when we read it together, you understand what's going on. Okay, we're going to start with the tragic hero, who is Macbeth. Now, the tragic hero is an idea which we often relate to a Greek writer called Aristotle, who was writing a long, long time ago. And Aristotle came up with the idea of a character of noble birth with a fatal flaw. Now, noble birth, we're thinking a lord, an earl, a thane. Thane is the Scottish word for a big landowner, someone with respect and responsibility and wealth. So we're thinking someone quite high up in the social hierarchy. Now, a fatal flaw is someone's character flaw. So, is the person too ambitious? Are they easily jealous? Are they easily manipulated? In Greek, which Aristotle was writing in Greek, the word for that is hamartia. And this flaw leads to a reversal of fortune and the hero's ultimate downfall. So Macbeth's ambition leads directly to his downfall. Othello's jealousy leads to his downfall. Now, Macbeth is a military leader. He's a respected warrior at the start of the play. At this kind of opening section of the play, he's very loyal to Duncan. In fact, he's leading Duncan's army against some invading forces and putting his life on the line to save his king and his country. So he's incredibly patriotic at this point. And all of the other soldiers and the other leaders of the country really respect Macbeth for the sacrifices that he's willing to make and the danger that he's willing to put himself in for his country. He's also Duncan's cousin, so kind of adjacent to the main royal family. Now, Macbeth's wife is called Lady Macbeth. I'll tell you her real name in a minute, and she's often presented as being the Machiavellian villain of the play. I put a question mark there because there are multiple interpretations of Lady Macbeth's character, which we will dig into as we read the text itself. But the main interpretation is that she's a Machiavellian villain. So, what does Machiavellian mean? Well, it comes from a writer called Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote a book called The Prince. He's an Italian writer, and The Prince is really a kind of how-to guide about how to gain political power. And Machiavelli suggested that people should gain power by manipulating others. So, not by brute force, however, by convincing others, by persuading others to do what you want them to do. And that's exactly what Lady Macbeth does with Macbeth in the play. So we refer to her as being a Machiavellian villain. Her real name in history is Gruach. Sorry, not quite sure how to pronounce that. And we don't ever discover that in the play, but it's an interesting detail to know. She has had a child with her first husband, but she cannot have children with Macbeth. And that's a really important plot detail because it drives Lady Macbeth's motivation and it drives Macbeth's sense of frustration that even when he manages to become King of Scotland, he can't have children, so he doesn't have anyone who's going to inherit the crown. Lady Macbeth appears to be power hungry and ambitious, but she's also frustrated with her femininity because as a woman, she isn't able to kind of actively gain power in this society. So again, we'll talk about that when we dig into her character a little bit more when we get to the video on Act 1, Scene 5. Now, the other main character that we need to know is King Duncan. So he's the King of Scotland at the start of the play. He's very pious, and pious means virtuous. He's presented as quite a godly character. He's a very kind of good and honest and loyal and generous character. However, he is quite weak as a king. In historical sources, he's described as a man of many diseases. So, not the kind of strong king that you need in a society where other countries are trying to invade and take power. This is shown by him waiting behind when his troops fight in the battle and Macbeth leads the army into battle at the start of the play. But he is generous, he is benevolent, he does reward people for their loyalty. So, in some ways, he is a good king. Now, I've just given you a lot of information, so I want you to pause and practice the key vocabulary that we have learned. It's on the screen there. Now, my first suggestion is that you do this with look, cover, write, check. So look at the screen, read the information, cover the screen up or look away from it, write it down and then check that you've got it right. So that's one way of doing this. Or make and use some flashcards. And I've got another video on this channel which is all about how to make and use flashcards effectively. And once you've done that and practiced that a little bit, start the video again. Okay, so some more characters then. We've got Duncan's family. So Malcolm is Duncan's oldest son and Donalbain is Duncan's youngest son. After Duncan is murdered, Malcolm flees to England, Donalbain flees to Ireland. We have the Thanes and the minor leaders. Now, a Thane is like an earl or a lord. It's a kind of leader in Scotland, someone who owns a lot of land, someone who is wealthy, someone who is powerful in Scottish society at the time. The first Thane that we know of, apart from Macbeth, is Macduff. So he's the Thane of 5. He is also a warrior. We do learn about his family in Act 4. We also meet Banquo, and Fleance is Banquo's son. Now, Banquo isn't described as being a Thane in the play, but he's Macbeth's loyal friend. He's also a warrior. He's also clearly very respected in the text. And we have Lennox, Ross and Angus, who are more minor characters. They are Thanes. They appear every so often to react to something that's happened or to give a bit of news or whatever. So they're also in there. Most importantly, or perhaps quite importantly, we have some supernatural villains who are the witches. Now, these 3 witches manipulate Macbeth, arguably leading him to his downfall, and Shakespeare presents them as being powerful servants of the devil. They are enigmatic equivocators. By enigmatic, I mean mysterious. The word equivocation, we will get into in the next couple of videos. But they are the characters who manipulate Macbeth. They give him predictions, and ultimately those predictions convince him to kill Duncan, which leads to his own downfall later in the play. Now, in many ways, the witches represent the 3 fates in Greek mythology. So the 3 fates are kind of mythological characters who determine everyone's journey in life. If you imagine that everyone has a string connecting them to the fates, and the fates can choose to cut that string whenever they want and end someone's life. So there's some clear allusions to Greek mythology in how Shakespeare's constructed the witches. We also have another villain whose name is Hecate. Again, lots of different pronunciations of this name, Hecate, whatever. I say Hecate. She's the leader of the witches, also the goddess of magic. She only appears a couple of times in the play, and it is debatable whether or not Shakespeare actually wrote this character or whether she was added on by another writer later on. Okay, another pause point. What I want you to do is stop the video, write 1 bullet point for each character. What do you remember about them? And then when you're ready, start the video again. So first we have Macbeth. He's the tragic hero. He's a respected warrior at the start of the play. Duncan is King of Scotland. He's very pious, very virtuous, however quite a weak king. Lady Macbeth is our Machiavellian villain, ? There might be something else going on with her. She's married to Macbeth. She persuades him to kill Duncan. Macduff is a Thane. He's the Thane of 5. He is a warrior. We will meet his family in Act 4. Banquo is also a military leader. He's also a warrior. He's friends with Macbeth. Fleance is Banquo's son. Malcolm and Donalbain are Duncan's sons. Lennox, Ross and Angus are other Thanes. They give messages and react to things in the play. We have the witches, who are the supernatural villains. They represent the 3 fates from Greek mythology. And we have Hecate, who's the goddess of magic. Okay, hopefully you got all of those right. If you didn't, I suggest again doing some flashcards or some cover right check to really make sure your knowledge is secure before we start getting into the text itself. Just to finish us off then, I'm going to talk about some of the minor characters in the play. So we've got the captain. He turns up in Act 1, Scene 2, and he gives news of Macbeth's success, his victory in battle. We have Satan, not Satan as in the devil, but Satan as in Macbeth's servant. We see him in Act 5. The porter is a really interesting character. He looks after the gates into Macbeth's castle, and we'll come to his character in Act 2. The old man turns up, comments on the action, gives some thoughts about what's happened. There are some murderers who Macbeth employs to murder Banquo and attempt to murder Fleance. The Doctor and the Gentlewoman look after Lady Macbeth in Act 5, and we also have characters called Old and Young Seward. Seward was the Earl of Northumberland, so he fights against Macbeth at the end of the play. Okay, so that's it for the characters. Join me for the next video on Act 1, Scene 1.